Hey people, it's Ashley and this is Let's Talk Recovery Houston. So we're back in the office today, which that's always exciting. Okay, so this is Tony, who is a hard man to get a hold of sometimes. I've been chasing him for weeks, busy man. And so he's going to share a little bit today, and we're just going to talk about recovery and what he's been up to and all that good stuff. So this is my friend Tony.
Good afternoon.
So Tony, how long have you been sober for? What's your sobriety date?
My sobriety date is 12/3 of 2007.
2007. How long?
Oh gosh. 11 o'clock alarm. Y'all edit?
Yes.
Yeah.
How many times did you try to get sober?
Well, my original sobriety date is 9/3 of 02, and I ended up at the Salvation Army ARC on Washington Avenue. I actually knew nothing about recovery. The intake lady actually was one of my mother's patients. My mother's a medical doctor, and so they had been talking about getting me sober for years, and I had no idea. And so my mother just one day dropped me off over there, and actually ended up with getting 3 years sober, staying there for 21 months. I did back then the program was 9 months long, and then I did a year in their traditional living, and it changed my life. So that was my first run at this, and at that time, you could have not told me that I was going to ever use again. I was pretty sure that, I figured it out.
That was
That was it. I did work really hard. I, got a sponsor, worked the steps, went to, tons of meetings. Had a really good schedule, and I had gotten married during that time and had a baby, and my wife had relapsed. And I thought it was a good idea, since it was just me and my little baby, to move back to the other side of town. And it just broke my routine. And very slowly, I started working the steps in reverse. Started taking credit for a lot of things that I thought that I had done, and eventually made the decision to drink again. And I had been a bad addict for about 8 to 10 years, basically from like 23 to 32. Things in my life had gotten really bad. Then I went over to Salvation Army and got sober. But what happened in those 4 months that I was out was way worse than all the years of me using.
So that's saying your disease progresses, right? Even when we're not using, like that cliche, it's out in the parking lot, like doing push-ups, right? So that's definitely true.
It's definitely true. It's way worse. We talk a lot about if I use again, I'll die, and the book talks about it as well. And I don't believe it's a physical death. I think like the physical death would be the easy part. I believe it's a spiritual death that happens almost immediately once you pick up. I knew my drug of choice was crack cocaine, so I knew when that smoke hit the back of my head, I was like, I'm fucked. Yeah, I'm fucked, and I immediately knew that. And so I lost a lot due to my addiction. And all the times when I lost stuff, it was basically like I would have an apartment and, lose everything inside of it, or I had established myself again, lose jobs, relationships. But this time when I relapsed, they actually came and took my son. And that was a lot different.
That is different. Been there.
Yeah, that was a lot different. So he ended up going to CPS care. Fortunately, they gave him to my mom, and he spent 9 months with my mom. And it's somewhere in about 9.5 months sober, I ended up going over to Last Chance Recovery Center. I struggled there for a minute after I relapsed. Literally, like probably 10 weeks in a row, I would be sober Monday through Thursday. And then
Here
Friday
comes the weekend.
yeah, I would get my paycheck, and I'll be lost all weekend, and then they would, let me slide back in the door on Monday, and I would go through that whole process again and think, okay, this time it's going to be all right, and start going back to meetings, doing what I'm supposed to do, and then that Friday would come along again, and it's strange. It's like it. Somebody talks about in the rooms, it's like telling the sun not to come up.
Yeah.
It's like it's coming up. And so each Friday I would get that feeling sometimes during the day. I don't know if any of y'all ever experienced it. It's almost a giddy feeling Friday morning when you know that paycheck is coming at the same time. It's this torture and this fear. that's running through you, but you're also somewhat excited.
Yeah, and see, for me, for a long time, it was more of the act of getting, right, than the act of using.
That's right.
Because you get those feelings, right, and you're like the sweaty and the nervous just before you even get it.
Before you even get it. So I'm over at LCRC. I'm working on getting my son back, which is a lot of stipulations with CPS, and I can't stop using. And it's a strange feeling. You know how important it is not to use. I love my son to the end of the world, and still, the addiction is so strong that you just body pressure builds and this anxiety builds, and the only way it feels to get out of that is to use. And I remember there was a really bad incident. We were at my parents' on Sunday for a barbecue, and this is when my mother had custody, and I have an older daughter, and we're making hamburgers, and she's probably at the time 7 or 8, but she's old enough to go and flip a burger. She's feeling pretty old. Well, my son follows her over there, and he reaches his hand up, and he burns his arm on the grill. So that next Monday, again, my mom's a medical doctor. She's his doctor. The next Monday, my son goes to daycare, and they call CPS. And so we're in this spot where CPS is threatening to take my son away from my mother. And so there's this big decision. They're in court, and I'm just terrified, not knowing what's going to happen. And of course, what I do is I make the decision to disappear. And so I say all this to speak on just the power of addiction and how our mind will work to kind of deal with this. It's almost like your whole body is just so full of angst, and you don't know what to do with this angst. And the more scared you get and the more fear you get, it seems like build on that angst. And instead of me trying to stick around, instead of me trying to wait to find out what happened, I literally I can remember taking my cell phone, tossing it in the back of my truck, and just going missing. And not showing up for 4 days and finding out, what a tough phone call to make. And my phone had been blowing up, of course, all weekend, and luckily, the judge realized it was kind of silly that he got medical care. Eventually, it was just an accident, and my mom was able to keep my son. But it's a reminder why it's so important to stay sober. It doesn't matter what your beliefs are, how much you care, how much you love. Addiction will still all that, and it'll make decisions and choices that you have to live with, which in turns makes it harder to get sober.
It's like this weird cycle, right? Because I've been there. I was in some legal stuff and with CPS, and they just needed 3 clean UAs, and that was the hardest thing I've probably ever done in my whole life. And my lawyer finally was like, "Just stop smoking weed." He's like, "Just stop." Like, he's like, "If you want to smoke yourself retarded later, that's fine." He's like, "You have to stop."
Yeah, the book talks about it for some reason at the worst times. We decide to make choices. It's funny, I think the book is almost taking liberty there, because the worst times are basically every day. It feels like the worst time, but in actuality, we're always doing it. So something big is going to happen in just that time frame anyway, when you're just constantly using it. And so it was a really weird, tough time in my life. And like you said, the drug tests, and after that weekend, I was able to somehow pull it together, and they let me back in because they kicked me that time. They finally kicked me out of Last Chance. They let me back in. I couldn't find a place, so they let me back in on Monday, and they said you have to move into the different portion of the program and go to meetings 3 times a day. And I was able to put it back together. So at about 9 months and 2 weeks, I was given back full custody of my son, which was amazing. It was awesome. Situation with CPS is their understanding, and with addiction at that time, based like a lot of normal people, they don't really get it.
Right.
Like what your lawyer told you, just stop.
Yeah, just stop.
And so I had been stopped. I was coming back up on a year, but now I have an 18-month-old son. It's just me and him. I'm working full time, taking him to daycare, trying to make meetings, and it's just a lot. And at 11 months and 3 weeks, I used again after getting my son back. And remember it just like yesterday. My mom had been out of town and she comes over. For some reason, my front door, I don't know, when you're high, it's all kind of stupid things that happen, but it wouldn't close. And so I'm sitting there sleeping on the couch. My son's in the back room. My mom just walks in and she just looks at me and, you know.
Parents know, right? They
Yeah.
just are like, what are you doing?
And so we go through this process again, and she ends up taking my son. He goes back to live with my mom, and I don't stop right then. I keep using, and you know I'm trying. I know, you know, and this time, you know, I've been out a couple of times, so I know like there's like this is going to sound crazy, but I tell folks this: if you start getting high again, just start giving away everything. Just burn it down as fast as you can. So I'm in this process of trying to burn my life down. It's like I don't know that I'm doing it, but I know that I'm doing it. And so I basically burn it down. So okay, I'm going to make a meeting. I get a friend. He gives me a job, and everybody knows my situation. So I start this job. My mom gives me $20, you know, for lunch or whatever. This is a shame. I'm 35 years old. My mom's giving me $20 for lunch, and of course I use that $20 at lunchtime, and I go get high. Somehow make it back to work, and at the end of the day, my friend's like, you know, I'm not going to give you any money, but here, I'm going to give you a Walmart card so you can, So I take that Walmart card, it's literally $6.50, pawn shops close at 7. I race over to a pawn shop, I buy a DVD player, which is funny to even think about now, but bought a DVD player, it was $20, took it to a pawn shop, got $10 for it, and went over and went to buy a dime, and I bought the dime, and immediately I see strange. I'm in Acres Home, so what you see, anything, I mean, you can see anything over there, so it's not necessarily. But I seen this guy with a gun running, chasing after somebody. I'm like, okay, well, I'm in the hood, so this is strange, but this could be happening. But what it was an undercover police officer, and as I'm backing out, 10 or 15 cops surrounded me. And it's called the Jump Out Boys, if y'all have never heard that term before. You hear it in songs, but I've actually lived this. And you go from a place that's very quiet to all of a sudden you're surrounded by an army of cops. And the cops telling me, if you hit that gas pedal one more time, I'm going to shoot. And I'm back on the ground again, you know. And, you know, looking back at that time, it was such a surreal feeling. It had been a long time since I've been in jail because I had that sobriety time. Just time had passed. And here we go. But again, it's just like CPS. It's one of the most beautiful things that has ever happened to me. I look back on it now, and it's actually like miracles, God's grace. It's like something steps in where, you know, I was trying so hard to get back in and I couldn't. And so I end up in jail. This is my third time being arrested for a small amount of crack cocaine, and this is my third felony, which makes it habitual. So I'm looking at 5 to 99 just off that. And so it's funny, I'm in the Houston City Jail, and of course some of y'all might have been there. If you've ever been there, what they do before they switch you over to the county, they start reading out your charges, and they start screaming out everybody's bond. And my bond was literally one of the highest bonds in the jail. I'm like, man, they didn't even find the crack. They only found my pipe. And bonds for like burglary, habitation, assault, all those bonds were lower than mine. And so I called my mother, and everybody figured I would just go in jail for a while. And it was a few days before Thanksgiving. And so I ended up going to Harris County, going to court, and just by chance, I didn't even have to ask, there was a probation offer. And it was 3 years of the super probation is what we called it back then, which was another gift. If you don't quite know what that means it's like not like regular probation. You literally have to go to your probation officer 3 times a week, plus at least 2 drug tests, which could fall on those days that you're there, or they might not. They do use a color system, so basically it means every morning at 5 a.m. you got to make a phone call. You better not miss that phone call, and whatever color they call, and if that's your color, you have to go down and test. So there was days I was at the probation officer 4 days a week at least, and the good news about that, you got to meet your judge. And so once a month you had to go to court. In that process, nobody really, the understanding of still a recovery is still way off as it relates to the legal system. The mindset of what again, it's just don't do it. It's basically the mindset, not an understanding of what treatment, recovery, aftercare, sober living, how that helps sobriety numbers a lot. But I had made a decision just from my experience, I better go somewhere. And I went over to New Freedom. And so when I went to court the first time, she had seen the fact that I had went to sober living. And I can remember her commending me for this. And it was Judge Barr. I don't know, for a few of y'all, if y'all been to drug court, y'all know who she is. She's one of the toughest judges in Harris County. She was hard on us. I can remember, you were late. This was the conversation. Okay, you got that one chance. If you show up late again, and we're not going to even talk. And I can remember people, walking in 2 or 3 minutes late, and it's Houston. It's rough. The court was at 6:30 at night, so you're racing to get there regardless of where you're coming from. And I can remember people doing it's like, no, there's no conversation. Just take your belt off, and you're going to go sit over here. And so it actually worked out for me that, each month coming in with all my clean UAs, because you took a lot of UAs, me being in sober living, I had a great probation officer that was, he just was, he was kind, and he treated me like a human being, and he respected the fact that I was trying to live my life differently, and he always showed that in the reports. And so they'd always told me, I got 3 years probation, they'd tell me if I did what I'm supposed to do, at 18 months they're going to let me off. So I had this good probation officer for over a year. And then right when we get towards 18 months, he leaves. And I go through all these different probation officers. So I end up with one, and of course, getting sober is tough financially, if you are not aware of that. Being a felon is not like the best way to get a good job. And so I'm behind on my fees. But I asked the lady, I said, hey, they said at 18 months, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do to let me off. And she's like, no, you're not. I said, well, can I at least talk to the judge? And she tells me no the first couple of times. And I ask her again. And she basically gets smashed. She goes, okay, if you want to go talk to Judge Barr, fine, let's go talk to her. And so we go to court, and she gets up there and she goes, Judge, yeah, this guy's done all this, but he's not paying his fees. And the judge says this simple thing, is he sober? Has he been doing what he needs to be sober? She said yes. She goes, has he made an attempt to pay? She said yes. Hit her gavel and let me off at 18 months sober.
Wow.
And things were, I believe this whole process, I believe what the book says, I am beyond human aid. And at that time, even my first time sober, I wouldn't have said it like this. I would have thought that because I got a sponsor, worked the steps, did 90 and 90, did all the things that y'all told me to do, that was the reason why I'm sober. But I realize now that's not actually the case. Not saying that you don't need to do all the things, that you do need to do all the things and even do more if you can. But I realized something that had just happened to me. I just wasn't the same person. And I've been just changed. A miracle had happened. I look at it more the story of the lost sheep, and I look at it as like I did something to get sober. I feel as if one day God, Jesus said, Tony, come on. I'm seeing you flounder on over here lost. You're not going to get it. Just come on. And that's been my story of recovery, and it gives me a much better perspective and understanding of looking at it. Because I know a lot of people who try really hard, and they really care, and they really love, and they just can't get sober. And sometimes the people that are the worst to them are us in recovery. We can be very hard on each other, and we can be very not understanding of people not being able to get it, which is so weird because a lot of us have struggled getting it. So the book has taught me a lot on this, and treating people with love regardless of how many times they go out. It doesn't mean that I can't set boundaries. It doesn't mean that I have to enable, but it does mean that I can say whatever I have to say, but I can do it with kindness and love. And I realize the effects of living like that have not only allowed that person at some point, if they do want help, they will come back to me and ask for help because I wasn't a jerk to them. At the same time, it has my life been a lot more peaceful and me to recognize this gift of sobriety that I have. That it's not something that you can earn, it's not something that you can do, it's something that has to happen, and that miracle is available for all of us, but I do believe it's a miracle.
So after you got off probation, what did that look like? Were you working? Like, what did you start doing after
I want
probation?
to tell you, God is amazing, and there was a guy when I was in my first 3 years of sobriety, and I was really active, and I was chairing and leading meetings, and I would always get this one guy to lead whenever I had that platform. And this guy, gosh, I can't even think of his name right now, but he'd had 10 years sober, and I loved having him lead because he was kind of grouchy and mean, but he was, strong about recovery. And so I'm at Karen's house in New Freedom. And I don't know. At this time, it's in that first few months of recovery, but I looked up to this guy, and Karen's screaming for me, and I run to see what she's asking, and there's this guy. He's out in our driveway, and he's taking his head, and he's banging it as hard as he can on the steering wheel. And so I go over there, and I physically have to stop him from hurting himself. And so we get him calmed down, and he leaves. And I realized it was that guy that had 10 years sober. And Karen told me, goes, Tony, you know what? He just got off 10 years of probation. And so, you know what? That made me emotional. But God was telling me, when your probation ends, you better work harder. It's, this disease being cunning, baffling, and powerful is really not a strong enough statement. It's also very patient, and it's also very tricky, and it looks for ways in. And one of those ways in is like when the pressure is off of you. But the power of God is so amazing, and that was just telling me, hey, you double down. I tell folks now, if you're under any kind of pressure of legally, on probation, work, when that stuff lets go, you add to what you're doing. You don't let go of what you're doing, and it's really important. To me, the most important thing about my sobriety is not about the way that I feel. Matter of fact, our saying at TRT is "fuck your feelings," because that's going to get you in a lot of trouble. If you're basing your life on feeling good, sobriety, it's going to be impossible. Because I believe that's alcoholism. I believe alcoholism is something that plays with your mind. And we are prey to misery. We make things a lot worse than they really are. I know for years people told me I didn't care, and that was never my problem. My problem was that I care too much. Things bother me too much. I'm into my feelings too much, and that doesn't change sober or not. The difference today is that instead of putting a grenade in my hand and pulling the pin when things go wrong, y'all have given me other tools to use to settle down that angst that we were talking about earlier. That feeling like I can't stay in my skin. The problem with our solution is it's slow. It's not as fast. I know how to get to the moon right now, but with recovery it doesn't work like that. We have to do things like pray, meditate, call somebody. It's all these things that always work, but they're not instant.
They're not. I had somebody that he called me and he's like, I just want to go through these, hurry up and get through these steps and get to the miracle already. And I was like, it doesn't work that way.
A lot of this is really learning how to sit in your pain. And when I can learn to sit in my pain, and if the worst thing I have to deal with is the way that I feel, and I learn how to deal with that, then nothing else can get you. It's a lot of days that I feel pretty tortured a lot of the times. My mind does not treat me well with feelings and emotions. I have to. We have a term, and gosh, this term sounds terrible. I don't even know if I should say it, but I believe that I'm a little bit emotionally retarded. I just, on an emotional level, I'm an 8-year-old, and it's gotten a lot better, and it has changed. But for some reason, we just struggle with simple emotions. They're almost too much for us. And this feeling of gloom, that think on the wall, that first thought is usually the feeling of gloom. It has to go bad. The world is ending. This is the worst thing that ever happened. And that's why it's so important to have those those think, and then think again. Because then you can kind of walk yourself back to kind of a normal place of reality where, the world's not even ending. What's funny about us, and or funny about me, everything feels like it's the first time. And it's So whenever something happens, it's like, this has never happened to me before. But that is so far from the truth. Being in addiction for years, we have dealt with so much bad. We're so used to bad that we should actually be pretty good at it. Getting up, we're like the best getter-uppers in the world. Our whole life will be over and somehow we'll drag our sorry ass back up and get back at it. The problem with us is the staying up part. And the staying up part of recovery is, it's where it's at. And that's in your routine. It's not in your feelings. It's definitely not in your emotions. It's in what you do. And so I have this process that regardless of what's going on, I have a routine. And that routine ensures my sobriety. Not me feeling good. Not me being happy. Not things working out my way. If I can stay on my routine, and I can tell you that sounds very simple, and it's really not. There's a couple of guys that I just admire so much in my home group. Of one is Surfer Gary, and he said something. And the book talks about a good use of the will, and he says like this: sometimes you gotta fucking force yourself. And a lot of days, I simply just force myself to put myself in a position to receive this power, so I don't have to drink a drug. And that's how my recovery looks a lot of the time. And some people, that's good for your first year when you're on that kind of little high. You can almost smoke that shit.
Yep.
Oh, your sobriety, it almost feels like, I'm taking a hit. But at some point, the rubber's going to hit the road. At some point, you have to stay sober because you want to live and have a productive life, not because you're getting all these rosy feelings or your family's back or things have worked out financially or whatever it is. Sometimes you got to stay sober just because it's an is. I had to smash the idea that I could drink and drug like a normal person. And so what that means to me is that regardless of what it looks like on the outside, regardless of what's going on, drinking and drugging is not going to work. It's just not going to work. It's not about do I like drugs or want drugs. What's weird, the first time I got sober, God took it all away. I had this taste for all of it. I couldn't stand it. I was so upset at my disease that I just hated drugs and alcohol. Well, when I relapsed and then relapsed again, I was like, no, Tony, you have to live with it. And I live with the fact, I'd drink a margarita right now if it wasn't going to kill me. And it doesn't bother me today. It's like I no longer have to live in this place of bullshit. Oh, I hate alcohol and I hate drugs. Well, obviously that must not be the case. If you look at your life, obviously you
like
really, really, really like that stuff, and what the freedom that we're offering it is, you don't have to stop liking it. The two things have nothing to do with each other. There's a lot of things, a lot of behaviors that I used to like that I don't do anymore. And what I have to do in my mind mentally is put drugs and alcohol in that same box. There's a lot of things that we used to do that we don't do anymore because you just don't do that stuff. It's like at some point you got to grow up. And sobriety offers you a pathway to adulthood. And it's the hardest thing I do above anything. It's trying to carry myself in a way that I don't. Because now it's not about me getting high or me drinking. I've done horrible things in my sobriety that have caused more harm than I did when I was drinking or drugging. And they're usually due to my behavior. I'll make a bad decision. Most of them have to do with my emotions and my temper and my words. And I can do and say things that can be very, very costly, even more costly than it was when you just messed up because you went and got high again. And what's even worse now, you can't blame it on getting high.
Right.
You
It's
can't
like,
go,
it's not drugs.
No, this is just me.
Being an asshole today.
And we know that assholism and alcoholism walk hand in hand. And so that, practicing over and over again. The cool part of it is this: if I make a bad mistake now, I generally can make an amends, say I'm sorry, and work through it. As long as I don't get high. Because if you get high, all bets are off. Then it's out of your control. What's this saying? You can ask a 3,000-pound gorilla to dance, but he's going to say when to stop. And so now I just make my mistakes, and I make them, but there's a pathway out if I listen to y'all. There's things that I can do that don't require me, burning my house down to get my life back together. I can just work through the agony and pain of being human. I don't know why that's so hard for us. We struggle so much with the fucking up, and I think part of it is for years, in my case, all that negative self-talk. You know, your first several years, you figure like, hey, I'm going to get it together.
Yeah.
But you'll hit a point, at least I hit a point, when you realize, hey, you know, there ain't no getting it together. You know, and if I believe, like the book says, I was doomed to die an alcoholic death. And once you hit that point, all the bullshit or even the true things that you say in your mind just don't really matter anymore. It's like an is. This is going to be the way it is, and nothing's going to be able to change it. And this is kind of where you're at. And so you build up this constant tear down of yourself, these constant emotional feelings that, you know, I tell people this is how I feel about relapse. It's not just you're going to get high, because yeah, you're going to get high, but all the bullshit comes with it. And part of my bullshit is that I'm going to end up on a bed wanting to die, without a doubt. Whenever I got high again, it ended up to me like I can't take living anymore. And that's what relapse means to me. It doesn't mean getting high. It means that you're going to end up, you know, someplace out of money, out of dope, and really wanting to die. And so I remember that I walk with that thought all the time. It's so much bigger. You know, a lot of times we just focus on, well, we'll get high. Yeah, you'll get high. But that's not going to be, that's just, it's like swirl ice cream. You know, you can't separate it. So you can get high, but all the bullshit's coming with it. And that understanding, realization of that, are you willing to pay the price that it's going to cost to get high? And just because you know that, it doesn't make it an easy decision. But when you realize that it's an is and not a might be, there is no getting away with it. None of that is, all this bullshit that, you know, fine, go out and drink like a gentleman. But if you have what I have, all the bullshit's coming with it. Every single bit of it. The loss of job, family, friends, relationship, your dignity, any kind of mental stability you have, all goes out the door with it. And so I did my best to hold those kind of thoughts. Those are the thoughts that I want to hold close to my mind. That's the stuff that I want to remember first. Is not the good times, or even the times you're talking about, because to me some of the best times was the preparation more than it was the getting high. The whole lifestyle was real important to me. So, you know, remembering that's not where it is. Where it is that pain and torture. This setup they have on page 24. Where it says at certain times we can't bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory and suffering of a week or a month ago. I believe that's a complete setup. I don't think that sober you can ever feel that. I don't care how hard I try right now to remember the humiliation and suffering, I can't do it. I can imagine it, I can think about how bad it was, but what my relapse taught me, the only way you can feel that way and to really understand it is to put yourself back in that position. And when I put myself back in that position, then I really understood page 24. Is that you can't, on this side of the fence, feel that way. You can only feel that way when you're actually in that spot. And I try very, very hard to not put myself back in that spot again.
Because you do. I remember the first time I heard this lady, she read that, and I was like fresh out of treatment, right? Didn't know what the hell I was even doing. She read that, and I was like, no, that's not true, right? I'm having this big debate with her, and I'm like, no, I'm never going to forget this, blah, 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 blah. Well, a year later, I saw her post oak, and I went and made an amends to her. Because I had relapsed, right? And gone through all this stuff, and then was trying to finally get sober again, and I was like, I was a big asshole, and you're right. I was like, I didn't remember. And I was like, dang that book.
Yeah, because it's so cool. When we're in sobriety, we think like, okay, that's the key. The key is I'm going to remember how bad it is, and that's going to keep me from doing it. And in reality, it's like, no, man, that, you know, no.
It's those feelings, right? You don't
Yeah.
all, like, the shame and the guilt and just, you really don't remember.
You can't go back there unless you're there. It's, you know, I can't be out of money and no dope unless I'm out of money with no dope. You can't make yourself feel that feeling on this side of the fence. And so that illusion, I can think of how bad it is, and that's going to keep me from getting high. When we look at that rationally, it doesn't make any sense. We knew how bad it was then. I love how the book puts it in 12 and 12. It says, under the lash of alcoholism, we're driven to AA. And there we understand the fatal nature of our disease. See, I didn't understand how fatal this disease was. I thought I understood it when I was out there. Like, no. Stay sober. Continue to stay sober. stay sober a number of years and you start to really see the fatal nature of this disease. It's way worse than we can ever imagine. And it takes a lot of time to kind of wrap your head around that. It just does. And it doesn't make any sense because we've been through so much. You think it'd be, oh man, the stove's hot, it burns me, I'm going to not keep burning my hand. But for some reason, none of that logic, none of that makes sense is going to solve that. You can't solve this problem with reason. And unfortunately, we teach that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
We teach like there is this pathway. If you just do this, this, and this, and this, you're going to be okay. And that is completely underestimates, underscores the necessity, the need for the higher power.
Mm-hmm.
The book says it over and over again. I'm beyond human aid. I'm beyond human aid. So that includes my sponsor, that includes my home group, and most of all, that includes me. And that's where I wouldn't get. I get, well, oh, okay, I'm beyond human aid. Okay, so none of y'all can help me. No, you can't even help yourself. And it's a weird place. So how do you make this happen? How do you say I can't help myself? But at the same time, you're telling me to work these steps. You're telling me to go to meetings. Like, yeah, we are telling you that. There's a break in step one. Step one has two parts. I believe that first half of step one we're given. You can drink yourself there. You don't need to even work on that. You can figure out that you're powerless over drugs and alcohol just by doing drugs and alcohol. I believe the rest of the 12 steps and what this program is about is for the second half of the first step. My life is unmanageable. And I fall into this illusion that, of course, we're going, oh, okay, again, oh, it looks so great. I'm going to work these steps and I'm going to be able to manage life. Again, a very unreasonable statement. What, you're going to manage COVID?
Yeah.
Life is not something that you can manage. What has happened to me, I learned how to live in an unmanageable life. And that's the only difference. I can't control what happens. I can't control when people die. I can't control when people leave me. I can't control the loss of a job. There's a lot of things that are out of my control. The difference is, what do I do with those emotions and feelings when they happen? And we have tools. There's a lot of tools that are laid at our feet that if we decide to use them, we can calm that angst. We can calm our head from going crazy. We cannot take that grenade and pull the pin. We can just hold it in our hand and look at it like we love to do. There's something just about us. For some reason, the book just hits it right on the head. For whatever reason, we're just a prey to misery. And I don't know if it's because of all the things we've been to, we're just so comfortable there. I look at it like a blanket that has a lot of holes in it, but it's my blanket. So I know where every hole in that blanket is. So if I fold it just right, it's going to keep me warm. But in reality, I need to throw that blanket away and get me a new blanket. But I've been using this blanket for so long. And a lot of that fear and a lot of that pain is just such a part of me. So what happens when I'm sober, something will happen that I don't like. And it's not even that bad. But it hits those same pain receptors that hit me when I was getting high. So when something has happened to me that's really most people would just kind of blow off, to me it feels like, oh my God, I can't take it. I'm not going to be able to live through this. And certain pain, I experienced it when I lost that job 3 weeks ago on Monday. I'm back on that bed again wanting to die. 100% sober. Doing the things I'm supposed to do. But that pain is so deep inside of me, and I have to realize in my sobriety there's going to be certain feelings and emotions, for whatever reason, they don't link back to someplace reasonable. They link back to that pain that I had from all those years of my addiction. And learn to recognize that, understand that, and realize what's going on. It's not something that's easy to do, but it will eventually hit your mind again. It might take 2, 3, 4, 5 days or a week. But at some point you realize that that's not even in proportion to reality to what's really going on. I've had so many miracles happen in my life, and those are facts. The one statement they've always told me in recovery, which I can say that's 100% true, is that if you take care of your recovery, the rest of it's going to work out. I've seen that happen over and over and over again. The problem is, the next time it happens, I'm going to be like, oh my God, here we go again, the world's ending. But in reality, God always steps in. Why he does it the way that he does it, I have no idea. His will is normally not aligned with my will. The way that I want things to work out, they do always work out for the better, But what to me better is might be different what God means better is. So better to me would be more money and, better stuff. But better to him might be more peace of mind and more serenity. And sometimes I don't want that better. I want the other better. I want my security. I want to feel like, everything's okay. What I'm learning, that might not be the good stuff. That we might have it all backwards. That the struggle might be where all the real excitement is, where all the real growth is. That pain is actually heaven. And we confuse it for being something that it's not. And we have this reality of knowing that I never change from things going well. Ever. I've never started acting good and changed. It was by horrible mistakes over and over again, or about bad things happened to me that didn't seem fair, whatever it was. Those are the things that caused my life to change. That's where the growth was. It was always through the pain is when the miracles show up.
And being uncomfortable, right? Like, sometimes growth comes from when you're uncomfortable, not from like being set in this
What I challenge
comfort
folks,
place.
what I challenge folks to do sober is to put themselves in uncomfortable positions. The more that you can do that, the better it is for your sobriety. And at least that's what I think. And so I challenge myself now, how can I make myself even more uncomfortable? And it's really cool. There's a lot of cool things you can do sober. A lot of cool things that you can do single. You can not care if somebody tells you no. So you can have all these really uncomfortable conversations that, might not go well, but they're effective because you learn to just be okay with who you are. And, I don't have to always get a yes. It doesn't change the pain, but I've learned that, this is I'm going to talk about this. This is kind of on that same path, but I got sober to be free. And what I found, because I have this image the way my life's supposed to look, that I actually lock myself up in a lot of cages. And I actually won't live. Because I'm so scared of what the results are going to be that I won't even live. And I call it like rational thinking. Like, oh, I should be smart about this. I should be smart about that. And a lot of times, yeah, you should be. But a lot of times living that way, you're not even really living. You're basically just, protecting yourself from something that might be the thing that actually makes your life better. So I made a decision about a year ago to just live. Throw a little caution to the wind. I thought I had to be a saint to stay sober. It's good to find out that you don't. It doesn't mean that I'm not constantly trying to be a better man, but at the same time, I'm going to make my mistakes, and I'm going to learn from them. I'm going to deal with the consequences from them. But I'm going to live. I'm not going to put myself in this box of fear because, oh my God, if you do this, if you do that, you're not going to be able to take it, or it could affect your sobriety. For one, again, you're playing God, but it goes against the book. Page 101 of the big book. Any scheme that's tried to block the alcoholic from temptation is doomed to fail. My first 3 years of sobriety, I did that all the time. I wouldn't drive down certain streets. No, I smoke crack down that street. I'm not going down that street. Or, oh, I got to watch out for those, even driving past certain hotels and whatever. And it just doesn't work. Because then you're basing your recovery on your power again and not on God's power. So I had this other incident when I left Karen's house at about 5 months sober this time around. And I moved in with somebody in recovery, and he lived in Inwood. And Inwood is surrounded by acres homes.
Yeah.
So every night, back at those times, most meetings were at 8 o'clock. That was like the big meetings around where they're all at 8 p.m. So generally about 9:30 every night, I had to drive home. And I scored most of my drugs in acres homes. And I either got it from Tidwell or Gulf Bank. Well, he lived on Antoine. It's impossible to get to his house without driving by Tidwell or Gulf Bank. So every night I had to make a decision. You're going to go home or you're going to go get high. And it was one of the best things that ever happened for me. Literally, 3 or 4 months in, I didn't even recognize it anymore. I just drove home.
You just didn't even think about it.
You don't even think about it. And it's important that we, now of course I had worked the steps by then. There a lot have been going on. I don't suggest this for somebody really early in recovery. But it's pretty bottom line to me. Either you're going to get high or you're not. We do all this talking. It's like, man, you can go do all that, go to all your meetings, do all your step work. Yes, do all that and more. But either you're going to get high or you're not going to get high. All this playing around with it is, to me, it's like it's a lot of wasted time. The book never tells you don't drink. I used to just thought it said it twice, but actually 4 times in the big book, in the first 164 pages, it tells you to drink. At TRT, we have a lot of course, a lot of people there, but I have a lot of staff, come telling me, oh, this person looks like they're going to relapse. Well, God bless them.
Mm-hmm.
It took every drink, every hit to get me where I am today. And it's a scary thought, but sometimes the best thing for us is to really figure out, what the truth is. And that's really scary for us because we could die.
Yeah.
But the truth of it is, I don't know if there's another way of getting to the jumping off point. I know the book talks about there's people that can recognize where they're at, but I'm way too much of a dumbass to be able to recognize.
Well, and I've told it to
around
people,
that.
I'm like, go get done already. I'm
Go
like,
get
just go get done, because you're not done, and it's like this everyday struggle with you, like you don't even know if you're one of us. Go figure it out.
Figure it out.
Go figure it out.
Alcohol and drugs do not get enough credit for the 12-step work that they do. A lot of 12-step work is done from drinking and drugging. I tell people now, do you know why I stopped drinking and drugging? Drinking and drugging.
Well, and for people that don't know, what is TRT?
TRT stands for Treatment, Recovery, and Transitional. It's TRT Sober Living. We are a group of sober living houses. We've been open now for 8 years. We are a 12-step based community, which means our focus is on recovery. We do not parent, which makes us a lot different than a lot of the sober living houses. For some reason, that idea that you can control somebody getting sober works, and I don't know where that came from. It sounds good, but that's not what we believe. We believe sobriety is a choice that's going to be made between you and your higher power. And so, of course, we have rules, and there's things that you have to do, and there's mandatory things you have to do, but they all deal with recovery. It's all based on how is that going to help you maintain your sobriety, and not about us telling you what to do. I believe if I have to tell you what to do, it's already too late. So I have a client, if I have to tell him to do his chores, I have to tell him to come in on time, we're not going to kick him out. But we're always come to the conclusion then, and we don't know if this time's going to work for you, this time around. Generally, if that's the issue that you're dealing with, telling people what to do, you're probably wasting your breath. And that's sad, because we want to help and we want to reach out to folks. I know I've spent a lot of wasting my breath over the years. And so we've changed a lot of our philosophy over times. If you don't ask me about recovery, I'll never talk to you about it. And I don't do that because I don't want to talk recovery, because I love talking recovery. This is because this is what the book says. My job, and what our job at TRT is to relate. We understand where you're at. We understand why you don't want to go to meetings. We understand why all this just sucks. And you're like, man, fuck this, fuck you, and I need to get out of here. We get it. But we're going to love you, regardless. And, it's not an open-ended love, If you're an asshole, you probably won't get as much love as somebody that at least trying to act right, because that's human nature. But we really base as much as we can on how does this relate to the 12 steps? How does this relate to you getting sober? What practices can we build off that and not build off this sense that we need to parent or tell you what to do, which actually makes it harder. Because we don't take some of those stance from treatment centers to parents. They would prefer that we were a little different on those areas, that we would get involved in relationships, or we would get involved in, making sure everybody is where they're supposed to be, which is always funny to me, because I was a kid. I snuck out all the time, and I get these parents, I can't believe you let my kids sneak out. I'm like, dude, your kid been sneaking out of your house for 10 years. You talking about, how am I going to keep him from sneaking out? And so we do our best with it. Of course, we watch, we supervise, we try to help as best we can. But a lot of times in doing that, you're playing God. And you're taking away from this beautiful power that can save us. And that's what it's about. It's about that power. It's not about something that we can do. It's not even about somewhat what the person can do. It's about getting tied to that power that can do all things. To where, I love the way Bill and Bob are so, I like to say they like to talk shit if you read the big book. Because they talk in terms and ways that we don't talk about in meetings, that we don't talk enough about with each other. They talk very positive. And when I first read it, I thought, oh, these guys are having a lot of ego. I was like, no, they weren't talking about the power they had in themselves. They talked about a power that they found that they don't have to trip over drugs and alcohol anymore. They both write it down in a book that they had drank for the last time. And they were 4 years sober. How often do we say that? How often do you ever hear in a meeting somebody said, I've taken my last drink? What if that was our conversation? What if our conversation was like page, what is it, page 16 of the big book, over thousands were as bad as Bill, all have recovered. Mm-hmm. They have solved the drink problem. That's page 16. Why don't we ever talk about that? Why is that not our subject of conversation that has solved the drink problem? Mm-hmm. We have this fear-based recovery. We try to scare people into like being sober. Oh, this is going to happen. That's going to happen. Like, man, I was in freaking Eggers home at 3 a.m. buying crack cocaine. You cannot scare me into not using.
Yeah.
It doesn't make logical sense. So like we've done so much crazy shit that what you're going to scare us now so we don't get high. Instead of having this talk about, man, there is this power out there that says that even if you wanted to drink, you wouldn't. Mm-hmm. That's one of the greatest lines in the big book. Even if he wanted to drink, he wouldn't drink. Now, like, what the hell? I can want to drink and not drink? And my experience is, if you stay sober, sometime during your first 14 to 15 months of sobriety, you're going to want to drink really, really bad. And I don't care how much praying, meditating, step work, whatever. For the years of being an addict, over that time period, it's going to jump on your back. And you're going to be back to what the book says. And sometimes you have no defense against that first drink, but a defense from a higher power. And I almost welcome my clients going through that process of like, you know what, here we are.
What you gonna do?
What you gonna do? And so this whole process and the whole way that they looked at it compared to the way that we look at it, we try to stay away from that. We try to go with this, hey, man, there is a way out. We're offering total freedom. We're down with a lot of things. We get it. There's this Suboxone craze right now. There's other things, and I'm not against or for anything. I try to stay away from all that. But I'm telling you, we can offer you total freedom. But there is a place for all medications. There's a place that can be used for all things. But again, you're limiting your freedom. We're not against it. It's I like to use an analogy. This is a tough one, but people think the welfare system is a good system. My whole growing up in my life, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Kids have to eat. But in reality, you create this whole level of society that's as far as they'll go. And they don't actually reach total freedom because that's not what they're being offered. They're offered like a Band-Aid of a problem that's way bigger than a Band-Aid. And then actually you create a whole society of people that are like kind of stuck at a certain level. And yeah, is it better than, shooting dope in the street? Yeah. But is it freedom? Is it actually living? That's debatable, and it's not my call. But at the same time, this program can offer freedom from all that. We don't have to get high over anything. We just don't.
Dang, this was awesome. Oh my gosh. Okay, anything else? Look at you. You good.
Open book here, man.
I love it.
Well, there's a lot of things I like to close with when I do things like this. And let me think of I would read something, but I'll talk about this and we'll close it out. And this is, again, there's a lot of stuff that are said in the first 25 pages. that are actually more scary than like the rest of the book. I've been on this one a lot lately, and it's page 20. This is very early. Our lives as ex-problem drinkers depend on the constant thought of others and how we may meet their needs. That is such a scary statement. It says our very lives depend on this. Not only the constant thought of others, that's in itself, it's not happening. I go to bed every day thinking about Tony and wake up every day thinking about Tony, but my lives depend on the constant thought of others, but it goes farther than that. How can I meet their needs? So in a time like this, how much thought are we giving to that? How much thought are we giving as ex-problem drinkers, not only to think about somebody else, but how can we help them? And that's how we survive. And I don't know if that's even possible, but it is something to shoot for. It is something to think about and something to try to do. And what this program has taught me is that I'm selfish to the core. Y'all taught me how to live an unselfish life. And if I do it over and over again, it becomes a working part of my mind that I actually can live an unselfish life and still being selfish and self-centered, which is basically the truth. And so I love this process and this gift that we've been given, that when we face times like COVID or social injustice, man, we were prepared for this. It's like we were, we were taught levels of acceptance and levels like, this is the way it is. And we have such a gift right now to give back to the world as they struggle with things that are outside of their control, that we've been taught how to deal with just by being in recovery. And so I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I love recovery, and I'm grateful that you allowed me to do this today.
I'm grateful that you were on. You want to give any shout outs to anybody?
No.
No?
Forget everybody.
It's like,
no, I'm kidding. I'll give a shout out to my other job, which is my passion and what I love to do, which is Mercy Street.
Yes.
Mercy Street is at Chapelwood Methodist Church. We are a church that deals with recovery, and we mean that in the total sense of recovery, not just addiction, but whatever you're suffering from. Come join us one Saturday night. We have a lot of fun, and we're blessed to walk with everybody.
Yeah, Mercy Street's awesome.
Yeah, shout out to Melissa.
Yes.
You're an amazing pastor.
Melissa, you need to come on my podcast. So shout out to Transformation Enzymes for letting me use the space. And so this was exciting this week. You can now find us on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So check out all those things, like and share with your friends. And that's it for today, people. Bye.